Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about redefining what success looks like. And joining me for today's discussion, I've got Matt Jodouin from Canada. How you going, Matt?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Simon. I'm looking forward to being here.
I'm looking forward to you being here and having this chat and redefining what success looks like, because we often think about success as a workplace thing and having success in our careers. But we're going to expand that a little bit further today and talk about success in life and what that looks like, let's say, as fathers. We're both dads, and our marriages and our friendships, guys connecting with other guys, and also our mental health, what our success looks like in there. And you've got a bit of a backstory, so we'll get to that in a minute. But to introduce you to the audience, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a men's personal development coach, and also a business owner. So we're also going to chat about your business a little bit later on. But before we start, or to get started, should I say, we're touching on success. I'd love to hear just what is your definition of success?
Yeah, totally. And, this is something that I'm really interested in and intrigued about. And the reason is because, I have the opportunity to ask people that very same question oftentimes. Most people really struggle to come up with a response. And it's very vague, and they kind of ramble on and on about, they've got some elements of, freedom of time and, financial freedom and things like that. Maybe, some fitness sprinkled in there and stuff. But I just think that that's really interesting. And the reason I think that that's so interesting is because, if you look at the general public or population, you're following what people are doing online, it appears to me that people are working really hard to try to become, quote unquote, successful. But then when you ask them, well, what does success even mean to you? They kind of pause and they're not even really sure about what their definition of success is. And, I think that word probably means different things to different people, depending on who you ask. And I know for sure that there are some people that feel like success is, if you make a lot of money. And I've certainly kind of fallen into that trap a little bit in the past myself. But, I know firsthand, but also via proxy, that there are people who earn a lot of money, but they're stressed out all the time, or it's come at the expense of either their relationships with their family or their spouse or their kids or both. Or maybe their health, they've got a lot of money, but they're sick or they're overweight or they're struggling, they have chronic illness and things like that. And to me, that just never, or it doesn't strike me as a comprehensive definition of success. There's got to be something more to it than just that. So that's something that I've kind of had to grapple with myself personally. And I found that the challenge was learning to kind of unlearn a lot of some of society's kind of norms and expectations that are sometimes placed upon us, and get really clear on what is it that I really want? Not what I think that I should want, or not what I think that I should do, but what do I want? What does that look like? And, and who do I want to be? What do I want to achieve? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to stand for? There's a tool that I use with clients. It's called a wellness wheel. Are you familiar with a wellness wheel at all?
No, tell me. Let's go.
Okay. Well, the wellness wheel it's a tool that I use with clients to kind of take personal inventory. And it's just an opportunity to kind of press pause and check in with yourself a little bit and ask yourself kind of where am I at and how am I doing in certain areas of my life? And it outlines a number of different areas. So you've got your health, your relationships, your finances, your work and career, your spirituality, your personal growth, your fun and recreation. I've found that in the past personally, and also in a lot of the clients that I work with, that people have a tendency to prioritize their work and their career and their finances. And that part of the wheel is, oftentimes overloaded, but the other ones are kind of like underappreciated or emphasized. And I've come to the point in my life where you can call me selfish maybe here, Simon, but I want it all. I want the finances for sure. And I want the like fulfilling career. I also want the like freedom of having the opportunity to set my own schedule and be able to work from anywhere and take a day off when I want to or need to. But I also want the like deeply rewarding relationships at home. I want that with my family. I want the fitness too. Like one of my goals is to have the body of a Greek god, so to speak, is kind of like how I put it. But I want all of that. And I think that it's possible. And that's something that I've kind of made an effort to really work towards. And certainly, I think that that's an evolution and always a perpetual process. But I'm certainly a lot better off today than I was a few short years ago, I'll tell you that.
You're raising a few great points there. And it's the same when I'm in therapy with guys as well, which we're trying to find what do they want and what do they want to stand for? What are their personal core values? And I've done episodes before on values and establishing what your values and then using them to make decisions. And I don't think you're selfish in wanting it all, because I think so many of us do. We want more from our lives, and we want balance at the same time. So we want more that can enable us to live the life we want. And often the tool is the work, though. Like the tool is the money. If we can see it from different perspectives, we can break it down and notice that work piece that we're often playing in our heads isn't the only piece that warrants attention. I have this same conversation with my social work supervisor. So as part of a social worker's journey and any allied health, therapists and coaches as well, it's good to have a supervision with someone who's external to your business and to keep you guided and grounded and to work through some of this stuff. And a lot of stuff for me comes up with imposter syndrome and me feeling like I'm not doing enough or I'm not good enough or whatever. But it always comes back to, Simon, what does success look like? How do you define success? Is it a billion guys coming through my therapy clinic and I make a lot of money out of that, but also I'm exhausted because, that's a lot of work to do? Or is it the fact that maybe 10 guys come back and they come back and they come back and you're having a profound impact and a deep impact on those 10 lives? Or is it just one guy that comes through and you're still achieving your purpose? And is that good enough? Is that success? Or does maybe work need to be put aside and focus on your health or your relationships? So this is where I want to divert from the work piece, because we could talk about work, and most of us think of this as work. Fatherhood, one of the most hardest things you can do in life. I've got two. One of them's still in bed at the moment. It is 6 a.m. in the morning, but you're a dad as well. What does success look like for you as a father?
That's a really good question. And I think that one thing that I'm really striving towards, one thing that I'm really trying to keep in mind is that I want to be a safe place for my kids to come, whether they're happy, whether they're hurting, whether they're in trouble, whether they're scared or what have you. And I think that developing those relationships and providing an opportunity for them to share, whether it's the things that they're excited about and interested in school or their video games, or, the little, conversations that they're having with other kids on the playground and things like that. I think for me, it comes back to developing that deep and genuine relationship. And like, just full transparency here, like that's not always easy to do. I remember actually here, this was a real teaching moment for me. And I remember, when my boys were quite young. So we have two boys. We have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. I remember very clearly that there was a time where our kids were involved in gymnastics. We put them in karate and gymnastics to get them moving and active and burn off some of that energy and that sort of thing. And my youngest came home from his first gymnastics lesson and decided that it was going to be a good idea to try to do a front flip off the stairs. Okay. And obviously it ended with like bloody nose and tears and things like that. And my first instinct was not necessarily one that I'm proud of. Okay. My first instinct was I was frustrated and I was angry. I reacted, with a small little outburst, but like, what are you doing? What's going on? And my oldest son, like I oftentimes, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, Simon, but I think that our kids teach us more sometimes than we teach them. And my oldest son looked at me and he said something that was so smart. And I'm going to try not to get emotional here, but he said that something to the effect of, if you react like that, Dad, when we're upset or when we're hurt, I'm not going to feel comfortable coming to you next time we get hurt. And I thought for the kid who's like 8 years old to have the wherewithal to be able to articulate something like that was really profound and really powerful.
Wow.
But it was also, to me, it was like he had a great point. And looking back at my past and my history and all the trouble that I got into with drugs and alcohol and car accidents and girls and, school and fights and things like that, if I can't react positively and be supportive with those little things, how can I ever expect them to trust me or to come to me with some of those bigger things? And so that was a real aha moment, and something that I've consciously tried to really keep in mind moving forward, because those events, they still happen. We still have skinned knees and, bloody noses and stuff like that all the time. So
that is such a cool story. They do, our kids like really do teach us a lot more, but probably than we teach them. It's about being the dad maybe that we didn't have growing up, or maybe it's about opening our eyes to a new perspective. Our kids see the world through very different eyes than we do. And ours is all clouded in judgment, risk assessment, what ifs. And theirs is like pretty much free of all that. It's free to just explore and express. And sometimes our kids hurting themselves, jumping off the stairs, they got to do it to learn. And we've got to kind of sit back and hold it and bite our tongue and not get involved, and then pick them up when they need it. But if they don't need it, my wife and I are doing the whole, well, she's doing it very well. I'm not doing it so well. The whole, just let them sort it out themselves. Like our kids are fighting and bickering and all that type of stuff. And I usually go in there and start carrying on as well. But then she's like, no, just let them figure it out, which is really cool. And different in my psyche, because like for me, success is two well-behaved kids that get along. But then she's like, no, they've got to figure it out. This is building resilience and problem solving. And then that's actually success for me. It's not me sorting them out, it's them sorting themselves out. And so I'm constantly evolving my mindset around fatherhood. And no one gives us a playbook when we become dads. A lot of it's innate and what we learned from when we were kids. Shifting towards your marriage and partnerships and relationships more in general, like what does success look like there as well? Because I guess our lives before kids was very different after kids as well. Like, can you talk us through some of the maybe successful moments that you've had in your relationships?
Yeah, easy, for sure. To summarize it a little bit better, I think that success in my home life looks like my kids and my wife being happy and excited to greet me at the door when I come home. That's the kind of thing that you can't buy that, you can't force that, and you can't fake it. To me, I'm really lucky because I'm married to an amazing woman. And we've been together for, it'll be 12 years this summer that we've been married for. And she's by and far way out of my league. Don't tell her that, but she's way out of my league. One of the things that we've really tried to do is to continue to kind of like date each other and to keep that energy alive and to keep that relationship alive. And so even just the little things like greeting each other at the door when either one of us get home, or if one person's up in the morning beforehand, like getting up off the couch and saying good morning, or making coffee or bringing coffee to bed, and some of those little things. I think that kind of genuine connection in that relationship, and everybody's a little bit different. And, what works for me and for my wife might not necessarily be what works for everybody or what they might aspire to. So I'm not suggesting that that's for everybody, but I know that for us, having that kind of genuine connection and also that support, encouragement, and being a safe place to land at the end of the day and be able to kind of not dump on, but share some challenges that you faced and either some fears or worries, doubts that you might be going through your head too, has been something that has really benefited us. I think that just having somebody who almost seems to support you no matter what and love you, not despite your shortcomings, but like takes you as a package deal. It's I don't know. It's pretty unbelievable, to be honest.
And I love the dating thing, like keeping things alive. You got to work on this. It's not something that is a set and forget type thing. Just like our kids, like we've got to constantly show up and work on that because our relationships are ever evolving. And so often I see it with guys that I work with is they go into autopilot mode and life starts getting taken for granted. Those relationships, our kids, what we're doing on the weekend, our friends, and so switching off the autopilot and switching on conscious living, that's essentially mindfulness to me, can really help us to nurture those relationships over a long term because they always need, like our gardens, we need to continually water them and prune them and trim them back and then grow some more plants as well. I don't know why I'm talking about gardening all of a sudden, but anyway, let's move on to friendships because what we do with our kids, what we do with our wives or partners is very similar to what we do with friendships. Now, a lot of guys at the moment, they're saying that loneliness, and I'm not sure what it's like over there, but in Australia, they're saying loneliness, and particularly male loneliness, is the next epidemic after COVID. We're having a mental health crisis continuing after COVID, and loneliness for guys. And I've experienced this. I've shared it on the podcast before about male loneliness, and I don't feel like I've been very successful at having male friends over a long time, ever since high school. And it's more recently that I'm making a conscious effort to create friendships with other guys. What does success look like for you in this space? Because I know you do a lot of work in the men's space. I'd love to hear your thoughts on friendships, nurturing those friendships like our gardens and our families, maybe also evolving our friendships. What happens if we have a guy or a group of guys that we're stuck in the same conversations from 20 years ago? Love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because I will observe my boys making friends. And it's super easy for kids. Like they'll meet somebody on the playground or on the street and, they'll have a favorite ninja character or something in common. And all of a sudden they're best friends. And, if you ask them, well, what's your new friend's name? Oh, I don't know, but he's my best friend, which is hilarious because I think that as we get a little bit older, it can be harder to develop friendships, especially with other guys, but even other adults, in my opinion. And that's something that I've experienced a lot personally. This is going back probably about 10 years or so now. But at the time, I owned and operated a brick and mortar business. And I worked as a personal trainer in a private personal training and wellness center that I owned. And there were a lot of people that looked to me to be somewhat of a leader and a mentor and a coach. And I didn't have a lot of that mentorship or those positive male role models in my life. And I felt like that was really kind of lacking. I remember struggling with that at the time. And my wife and I had just had our firstborn son shortly prior to that. And between the pressures of being a new dad and a business owner and trying to juggle all of those things, like I was losing myself in the process. And I remember there was one night in particular where I kind of like just had a bit of a breaking point, so to speak. And I sat down with my computer and I wrote out what later became a bit of a manifesto of sorts. And what I did was just kind of poured my thoughts onto a page and I expressed the need that for thousands of years, men have been getting around the campfire and learning from each other and sharing and supporting one another and, in connection and conversation and camaraderie. And I think that now, especially in the Western world, we seem to idolize our individual rights and our individual natures at the expense of some of that community aspect. So I wanted to create a men's group. And I floated this idea out to a bunch of guys that were kind of in my circle. And the response that I got back was overwhelmingly positive and told me that, well, this is obviously not just me that's experiencing this or feels, that this is needed. I created a men's group from a need to kind of scratch my own itch, so to speak. And we'd get together once a month or so and we'd do a cool activity. And sometimes it was like an archery lesson, or sometimes we just sit and have a big bonfire and shoot the shit. Or, other times we'd go, I actually went to the diving boards, the platforms, and we jumped off the 10-meter platform. We just did some kind of cool, scary shit. And what was another one? We went and meditated with Buddhist monks and just kind of got out of the ordinary, mundane, routine kind of things, routines and rhythms that we all fall into. It was super rewarding. And because of that, it kind of led to me hosting a men's retreat. And it was an opportunity to get away and to go out into the bush and the wilderness and kind of do some of those activities and kind of get together and have some of those conversations. And I loved it. In fact, there are still people in my circle that look back, think about, and talk about that and how memorable of a moment or an experience that was. And I think that that's something that is vitally important to us. So I think that for me, it's come back to this idea that if you can't find it, if it's not out there, it's up to you to create it. I've done that in various capacities in the past. I did that with my men's group back home. During COVID, my family and I, we moved to the west coast of Canada here into a place called Vancouver Island, and have since formulated something similar. And we've gone and we've did some foraging, like blacksmith. We made a little knife in a day, which was pretty cool. And I've also done something similar online and created a bit of a virtual community where it's an opportunity to get together and to share conversation and community and camaraderie and accountability. So I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. A lot of other people do as well. I have gotten some feedback from other people that suggest that that's not for everybody. And that's one of those things that, I guess kind of comes with the territory. And I totally get that. It might not be for everybody, but for some people, I think it's really important.
You touched on so many awesome points there, and particularly like our kids, how easy it is for them to make friends and do random things. And it took me to when you were diving off the 10-meter platform. That would scare the hell out of me. Like, I am absolutely petrified of heights. But I often see like kids, and I live on the coast here in Australia, and there's a lot of like little rivers with little like bridges over them, and the kids jumping off. And I remember growing up and kids would jump off the wharfs at the beach as well, and just explore and experience, almost like jumping off those stairs at your house. Like they're energetic and they do it with friends. And I found in my life, and so some of the guys that I work with have said the same, is that they became adults, 18 here in Australia, they get into the workforce, they lose all that. They invest all their energy into work or maybe their relationship or whatever, and they lose touch of the friendships and become lonely. And loneliness is that key piece there. And then they're searching for something. But I love how you said that you had to create it. If it doesn't exist, you might have to create something. And I too, last year, I came to a point where I was done being lonely and I wanted to start experiencing friendships again, and my own friendships, not ones that I've met through my wife. I wanted to create friendships, and so we created a surf group. And I'm a beginner surfer, and I found another guy who is a good surfer, and then we've just put it out there. So who's around on a Wednesday morning for a surf? And now we've got a group of about 10 guys who some come every week, some come every month or so. But it's a great place to just experience life through surfing, but then also catch up afterwards with a coffee and have really deep and meaningful conversations that aren't superficial. We don't know each other outside of the last 6 to 12 months. And so we're not shooting the shit from like we have for the last 20 years or 30 years, like some of my other friendship groups. And it's really nice. It's really good. It's really powerful. And I've had similar when I go to these men's retreats as well. I've done a few here on the coast. You go deep. It's this immense love for another man, love for his journey and his vulnerability and his authenticity. And that's beautiful in men. And that's what I love in the men's space, is getting to that space where we can take off our mask and say, I'm not this macho man that I've put out to the world. I'm actually someone who's soft and wants to go into some things, but I can also be powerful at the same time. And there's a lot of power in that. Great definitions of success. Absolutely.
I think that that's really true in a lot of cases. And one thing that I've learned really well is that despite what you might see on Instagram or online or anything like that, everybody's going through something. Everybody. It doesn't matter who you are or how successful you are or how much money you got or what that looks like on social media. Everybody's going through something. And I think that what I've found is that when you're able to kind of, like you said, take those masks off and be open and share and be vulnerable about some of those things, what you find is that what I've found maybe is that I'm not alone in that. That other guys have experienced what I've experienced or felt the same way that I've felt. And to me, one of the biggest mistakes that I made is thinking that, I'm the only one that's ever gone through this or ever faced this challenge. And that can feel incredibly scary and incredibly lonely and overwhelming. And even just having some of that connection, being like, really, you struggle with that too? Hey, huh? Wow. Kind of eases that burden a little bit and makes you feel like maybe you're not all alone in this world. And that's an incredibly powerful awareness, in my opinion, and something that provides a lot of strength for me personally. And I think can be a real positive in people's life.
You touched on a great point that's very pertinent to me at the moment, like social media, and we look out and see what everyone else is doing, and they're like, oh, they must be so successful. They've got 30,000 followers, or, I'm doing this at the moment. I'm comparing. I shouldn't compare. I'm a therapist, I know, but I'm comparing with other people with YouTube channels. I'm like, why are their YouTube channels just blowing up, and I'm really struggling with mine, and I'm seeing that as failure, but I'm not looking at the people that are showing up. Same with his podcast. Like, why isn't this like a Joe Rogan experience, for example? I'm like, he's been grinding for a long time and we don't see that. We see what comes in our feed on any given day and we compare. But we shouldn't. Like, success is what we define it as we talked about before. And what we measure success is different to what another person measures success. And that's really important to know. And social media is a bit of a trap in that space as well. And so,
can I share a comment about that real quick?
I would love for you to share. Yeah, absolutely.
Coming back to this idea of success for a moment. Okay. One of the best definitions of success that I've ever come across is by a mentor of mine by the name of Earl Nightingale. And I've never personally been mentored by him myself. I think he's long since deceased, but he's got lots of great, powerful content on YouTube. And one of the things that he shared that I've really dialed in on is this idea of success. And he says that a successful person is somebody who knows where they are, who knows where they want to go, and is making steady progress towards that worthy ideal. And for me, that just really strikes me as true because, if you're making progress in life, chances are you're going to be filled with feelings of like joy and fulfillment and excitement and accomplishment and pride. Like, it's a super rewarding experience when you feel like you're learning and growing and getting better, and it doesn't even mean that you need to even have achieved your goal just yet. But as long as you feel like you're growing and moving in the right direction, that's pretty rewarding in and of itself. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I've made personally, and what a lot of the people, the clients that I work with have found, is that we tend to think that success is going to be found in some distant and far off future or destination or achievement. And while there may be some truth to the fact that, well, you can accomplish something and you can celebrate it and it'll be rewarding, it's like, for me, real success comes back to like kind of being able to appreciate the fact that, hey, this is about learning to enjoy the process and be happy now and be mindful and be present in the small little day-to-day stuff, because it's a trap. And if you think that you're going to feel differently when you get X, Y, and Z, or when you achieve blank, or when you finally get, this, that, or the other thing, it just doesn't work that way. And I think as human beings, we have this tendency to, we'll achieve something, but then we're so quick to move the mile marker and we're so quick to move the goalpost that it's like, okay, well, on to the next thing and on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And we're kind of like a puppy dog that's just forever chasing its tail, and happiness and fulfillment's just out of reach. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, I do. Like, and I was talking about this with my wife this morning before we started this podcast. I said, wow, podcasting is so hard. Like, is it a slog? And the reason we're talking about this is because, like, oh, it's Friday. Can I go to the gym this morning? I'm like, oh, I've got to do a podcast. And she knows Friday mornings are my podcast morning. But I said to her, like, it's hard. Like, you do the interview, you do the editing, you do the publications and all the social media stuff. And in my head, I'm like I think I'm looking at that end goal, the Joe Rogan goal, where I'm like, everyone knows who Simon is and the Mindful Men podcast. But what I always often forget is I do each episode and I walk out of this room where I record and I'm bouncing around off the walls about how awesome each conversation is. In those moments, I'm there grounded in the moment. I'm enjoying that process. I'm getting fulfilled by the little steps along the way. But before that, it happens every episode that before I even come online and start chatting with people, I get this sense of dread and anxiety and stress about, because I'm always thinking about that mysterious end goal that I keep pushing the goalposts, keep further and further away. But really, the end goal is each episode in itself. It's such a valuable point. And I'm thinking about it literally this morning before we came online and met each other. And now we're having this awesome conversation. And I'm already beaming before I even walk out the door because it's grounding me in this very moment as we're talking. And for so many listeners out there, I know they're feeling the same. And guys that I speak to who listen to the show, we talk about this stuff quite often. And so this is going to be a great episode for everybody who's listening right now, or if they're saving that for their drive home tomorrow or whatever. So let's talk about fulfillment there. And why is this so important to really tune in? Like, I mean, we've just talked about it a little bit, but yeah, have you got more on fulfillment and why we really should tune into this as opposed to maybe the end goal itself?
That's a good question. That's an interesting question. And I'm not sure I have a really great response for you, other than the fact that I think that's something that I've really struggled with personally and continue to hear so often from other people. And I think that maybe it's just the human experience, that we think that happiness and that fulfillment, is going to be found, at some later date or destination. And it sounds so cliche, Simon, but I'm telling you, man, I really am learning that what you just described there, as far as like the anxiety and then the excitement and then everything else, that's the secret sauce. And what I mean is, like, that's where the magic is. And it's in the ability to slow down and to appreciate that and to be mindful and to be grateful in the moment. It's a process for sure. And I think that it's a practice. Mindfulness is a practice. Gratitude is a practice. And I think it's one of those things that are worth cultivating and getting better at. But you got to get those reps in. You got to practice it. You got to create that habit. And I still find myself having to remind myself or catch myself or bring myself back. And they talk all the time of sometimes I guess cliches are cliches for a reason. But when people talk about, happiness is an inside job, I think that they're absolutely right. In fact, Abraham Lincoln, he's got a quote that I believe he said that people are about as happy as they make up their mind to be. And I think that one of the best habits that I've developed in recent years is deciding first thing in the morning that today is going to be a great day. And I think that in the past, what I've done and what a lot of people do is kind of wake up in the morning and hit snooze and roll out of bed. And, they kind of wait to see, are they going to stub their toe before they leave the house? What's traffic going to be like? What's the weather doing and that sort of thing, to allow, those kinds of factors to determine what they think and what they feel. And instead, I think that, like, man, we can take conscious control of that and make a conscious decision that, hey, today's going to be a great day. And then watch, that's just the little or the nudge to your subconscious mind that as go out into the world and go about your day, that more and more things are going to jump out at you and reinforce that idea or that belief that, hey, actually, yeah, that was pretty good. I think it's a small but simple little exercise. And, you're talking about fulfillment. And I think that it kind of goes hand in hand with this idea that the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the quality of the thoughts that you think and the feelings that you experience or the emotions that you experience. That's why I think that mindset is so important. And I oftentimes will say that, perspective is a hell of a drug. Because chances are, Simon, like, if you're sitting there thinking about all the people that have got 30,000 followers online and all of the, like, YouTube downloads of this other podcast, and you're focusing on that, there's probably about 1 billion other things that you could be appreciating, but aren't. That's why I think something like a gratitude practice can be so, so powerful in transforming your life experience and the way that you feel about your life circumstances and the things that you have in it. It sounds, again, super cliche, but I think that there's a reason why gratitude is so important in so many different personal development books or programs and things like that, just because of how powerful it is. And interestingly enough, one of the things that I've discovered is that when I first started that exercise, as far as a gratitude practice, it was very intellectual. Meaning I could think, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my kids, I'm grateful for my health, but I never really fully allowed myself to feel the emotion of gratitude. And if you ask people, well, name 10 things that you're grateful for, it's really interesting to see that aside from some of the obvious ones, like most people struggle to kind of come up with a list of 10. But here's the thing, Simon. We live better than 99.9% of the human population that has ever existed throughout human history. And I think that we're so accustomed to just the kind of things that we have access to now, and that we just kind of take things for granted. And we forget that it wasn't even like 100 years ago that even just turning on your faucet and having a hot shower was like a rarity, if ever. Now we don't even think about it. Just little things like that, I think, just transform the way that I think and the way that I feel, and ground me in gratitude and ground me in mindfulness.
You said that you weren't sure how you're going to respond to that, but like that was perfectly like it's fulfillment. You got to do the reps. It's around different perspectives, grounded, mindful perspectives. As you were talking and talking about emotions and our perspective or our inside thoughts about how we're going to do this day, like it's going to be a great day. And I often think about, is my anxiety or is anxiety more excitement? Yes, every time I turn on the computer and I'm about to do a show, I get this super, what I say is anxiety. But then other days I'm like, no, this is actually excitement. I'm doing what I want to do. Like there's no one forcing me to do this. Like I actually do love it. And so shifting that perspective, saying, no, this is excitement, for example, is me doing those reps of me trying to shift that, maybe that negative discourse internally into a more positive discourse, which is very hard for us to do as humans, like because we're often comparing. But the idea is to come back to us and what we feel like success is. Now, you're big in the success space, like you coach in this stuff. Often coaches, and I'm a therapist, I'm a lived experience therapist. We have our own story about journey about how we got to working in this space. I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey and has success always been easy for you, or is this something that you've really had to work hard on in life outside of coaching? So yeah, I'd love to hear some of that backstory about you.
Yeah, totally. In short, it was very twisted and convoluted in a roundabout way to help me get to where I am today. I think that oftentimes we think that success is a straight shot or a direct line from where you are to where you want to go. And mine was certainly anything but that. In fact, growing up, I went to school to become a lawyer. And a lot of my family members are lawyers. And that was kind of, I don't want to say kind of preordained, but I felt the pressure or the expectation that that's what I should do, is get a profession. And so I went to school, I wrote the LSATs, and I got accepted to a law school. It was overseas in London, England. My wife and I got married, and a couple of weeks before we were getting ready to move to London, England, her UK visa was denied. And so she wasn't able to come with me. And so I had a choice to make, or we had a choice to make, which was, well, either I go and she stays and I spend the next couple of years apart, or we do something different. And so I deferred, and we ended up traveling and trying to do some soul searching. And really, we just got blackout drunk in Southeast Asia and Bangkok and Thailand and Vietnam and stuff like that. It was fun, but there wasn't a whole lot of soul searching going on. When I came back, I went to a gym session, a workout with my dad, who was working with a trainer at the time. And I've always been interested in fitness and that sort of thing, pretty active in athletics. And he asked me what I was doing and offered me a position to come and work with him. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm not doing anything right now. So sure, let's do it. And that led me down the path of becoming a personal trainer, and then later opening up my own personal training and wellness center. And I learned really early on that while most trainers focus on the big muscle groups like your quads and your pecs and things like that, I found that, the biggest muscle that we needed to train was the one between our ears. And it was people's attitudes, their beliefs, their perceptions, and their mindset. And when we started to train some of the mental and the emotional matters that were really at the root cause of a lot of people's weight gain, the weight just began to melt off by default. Lo and behold, running a business when you don't know a lot about running business begins to take its toll. And I started to experience all kinds of burnout. And it led me to situations that were not very positive coping mechanisms, like drinking alcohol to alleviate some of that stress and worry. And things started to kind of spiral as a result of that. I'm sure you can imagine. And it began to affect my emotional well-being, my mental health, my relationships, and eventually it even began to affect my business because, a business can only be as healthy as the leader behind it. And I made the decision in 2019 that I wanted to shift my business online and to focus exclusively on the personal development and free up a lot of that time because in some ways I was kind of a bit of a prisoner to my brick and mortar business. That's when COVID happened. And when COVID presented an incredibly unique opportunity for me to transition seamlessly online. But I got really fortunate there. And, when I look back at my path from where I was to where I am today, I never could have predicted everything that happened along the way. And in fact, I think that a lot of times the best things actually came disguised as like fucking disasters at the time. And what I've learned is that, man, everything is either a blessing or a blessing in disguise. And it's up for me to be able to find kind of like the opportunity or the benefit or, the seed of, success that's baked into everything. And that's up to us to find that, to focus on that, and then to cultivate it, to make it the most as far as what it could be potentially. And so my journey of success was super consisted of lots of twists and turns, surprises along the way. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me has been that even when things look dark or seem scary or don't go the way that I wish they would or wanted them to, I've learned to trust and have faith that, hey, man, things are going to work out. And look at what I've been through before. They always work out. And so it'll be okay, man. We'll find a way. We'll figure it out. I don't know what that looks like, but we'll do it. We'll do it.
It talks to a resilience. In those moments of tragedy or things just absolutely falling apart, we don't see it as success. We don't see it as a learning opportunity. We see it as the world's coming to an end. But with time and reflection back, and this is how I work, I'm not sure, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like with time and reflecting back, then we can see those little gold nuggets that helped us to grow and helped us to keep going. I'd love to hear your thoughts on at what point did you recognize that these were things that you used to grow and become successful? How was that process for you?
There's an old parable that I'm sure you probably heard about, like the Chinese farmer. The farmer has a horse, and one day he's talking with his neighbor, and the horse runs away, and the neighbor says, "Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear about your luck." And he said, "Well, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And the next day, the horse comes back with a couple of its friends, and the neighbor says, "Wow, that's so lucky. I can't believe your luck. Good for you." And he said, "Well, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And then again, the next day after that, the young son, the farmer's son, is trying to break this horse and tame it so that they can sell it and profit from it. And he gets bucked off and breaks his arm. And the neighbor's like, "Oh, wow, that's terrible." And the farmer again just says, "Well, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And then the following day, the army comes through town and tries to enlist the young son to go off and fight a war. And he's exempt from the draft because of his broken arm. And the neighbor says again, "Wow, that's so lucky." And the farmer says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And that's a conversation that my wife and I have continued to have. We probably say that weekly because, I mean, I don't know about you, but things don't always go my way. And in fact, that happens regularly. So it's kind of been not necessarily an ongoing joke, but that's something we'll remind each other of often. But we had a realization about a year ago, maybe it was 18 months ago. And that was that given enough time and enough reflection, those things that seemed like a disaster always led to something that was more positive. And so we changed the phrase. And we no longer say like, "Well, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." Now we just say, "Well, maybe it's good." And for me and for us, that's just been such a great little reminder. And it's great to be able to play off each other because I'm not suggesting that the point from a stimulus to our response is going to be like that. But I think that in the past, if it's been 6 months or a year before I could be grateful or appreciate or see or have that perspective, well, maybe now it's like 1 month, or maybe it's a week, or maybe it's a day, or maybe it's an hour. And if we can shorten that gap between being disappointed and then being, maybe it's good. And I'll tell you, what that does for us as far as freeing up our mental and our emotional bandwidth to focus on things that are actually within our control is unbelievable. And I believe it's really empowering, because then it's like, well, can I control that? No. Then why am I spending all this time and thought energy and emotional energy wasting on it? Focus on what I can control and get back to the task at hand. And I think that our results and our life have benefited tremendously because of that little mindset shift.
You got to get your reps in. You got to keep doing it, don't you? Like, you've got to tell yourself regularly and reflect regularly. Maybe not at the end of the day. Maybe it's mini ones during each hour. Like, oh, what did I learn this hour? Or what did I learn for this morning? I'm often doing that in the car when driving between clients. It's like, and I'm maybe get stuck in that negative loop. So I go, hang on, let's catch that. What's worked this morning? What have I done well? Or what's something that a client's told me that has made me feel good? And so I've got to do those reps. And that's a really important aspect, is when anything's positive psychology, and this is why therapists give you homework and coaches give you homework to do, is you've got to keep working on it. It's not just a once and done type thing. It's like, it's an everyday type thing. This notion of working towards success, whatever success looks like for you. And so I'd love to hear you plug the business now. You do your online work. I'd love to hear, what do you do? What can people expect? If there's a listener out there who is really keen to work with you, how do they get in touch? Yeah, plug the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle is Matt my last name is spelled Jodouin. But going back to a conversation that we had earlier about community, I've recently created a community on a platform called School, and School is spelled with a K, Skool. And interestingly enough, it's actually called Mindful Men. Okay.
It is. I saw it. Yes.
Oh, did you see that? Okay.
A good name.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's a free community that I open up to men from all around the world. There's people from Australia and US and the UK and Canada and all over, India also. And it's just, again, it's an opportunity to connect, to have some conversation, some camaraderie, and accountability. It's also a platform where I share a ton of powerful trainings on mindset, on habits, on personal development. And we regularly have free workshops and free guest speakers and people from all kinds of different walks of life, whether they be therapists or just actually this morning, we had a nutritionist that came and spoke to us about all kinds of things that guys like you and I would be interested in, as far as mental health and substance abuse and exercise and nutrition and relationships and fun and recreation and finances and things like that. And so tons of content, tons of value, and it's all entirely free to join. And so if any of your listeners are interested, checking it out, obviously welcome to do that. And then from there, if people are looking for more support or more accountability, or they want to go further faster, I have a coaching mentorship group that I have titled Momentum Mastermind. And we meet a couple of times a week. We have, again, it's an opportunity to check in, set some goals, break it down into small little steps, create accountability, and do some mindset trainings specifically around either live coaching aspects of what they're currently struggling with at the time. But it's a lot of fun. And going back to your point, it's super fulfilling. It's really rewarding. Yeah, it's great.
It's good to know there's other mindful men around the world. And guys, tuning into mindfulness, it's not just about meditation. It's not just about journaling. It's about connection. It's about mindful connection with another bloke from another part of the world, and opening ourselves up to diverse ways of thinking, feeling, expressing, and so forth. So I'll put the links to the show notes if anyone's listening and wants to tune in with Matt's work. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, Matt. I've really enjoyed our conversation. The last question I always ask every single guest is, because we can talk about some tricky things for guys, and listeners out there might be going, oh, I'm totally not successful and all this type of stuff. So we're going to lift them up now and bring them back up to feeling good. Is to plug something that's making you feel good at the moment. And that could be something you're watching or listening or reading, a self-care activity. It could be some men's work you're doing. What's lighting you up at the moment?
You know what's been really good for me lately? In addition to some of those things that I had talked about, as far as setting my intention, telling myself that today is going to be a great day, and having that gratitude practice daily, that's for sure been a huge. But one thing that I've really been trying to tune into lately is my breath work. Again, it's one of those things that you hear about often, but I really think that until you experience it, until you do it, until you practice it, it really takes on a whole new meaning. And I've been doing some breath work with Wim Hof as a guided breath work instructor, I guess you'd call him online. It's been incredible. And in the past, what I've found is that I've had a tendency, like a lot of people, but men specifically, to look to outside substances, whether that be food or drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or weed or whatever, to help them or make them feel something different on the inside. And what I've found is that through exercise or through my cold plunge or through my sauna or recently my breath work, I've been able to really kind of what I'm calling get high on my own supply. And the feeling and the kind of a rush or a buzz that I get from doing some of those sorts of things are way more fulfilling and way more positive, and don't have any of the negative side effects that a lot of my other past activities have produced. And so I'm enjoying that quite a bit. So that's kind of been something that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah, I love that, because I've recently, I say recently, the last couple of years, been dabbling. I'm not a consistent breath worker, but every now and then I'll go and do it. And I feel like it's like you. I used to drink to suppress emotions, but breath work allows us to do something that experiences our emotions and releases. In much the same way, the drinking for me used to be suppressing and to get rid of them. Breathwork allows me to experience them and get rid of them at the same time.
Right. Totally different, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's empowering. It's you walk away and you feel either a day of relief or maybe a week of relief. It's really an empowering thing. It's safe, it's clean, it's healthy. It's actually a good, positive thing. I love how you brought up breathwork, because it is, something I need to be more consistent. I can do more reps in, actually.
Do you have 2 more minutes, Simon?
I do, yes.
I was just going to say, you had asked earlier about fulfillment. And I think that one thing that I've experienced and noticed personally is that I think I see a very distinct difference between pleasure and fulfillment. And pleasure is pretty cheap and easy to come by. And you can do it with a shot of whiskey or just turning on your phone and scrolling through Instagram for a moment. And you can get some momentary pleasure that way, but it's pretty fleeting. And I found that real true fulfillment usually comes from facing challenges, setting big goals, making progress towards them, or overcoming some of our challenges. And the fulfillment, the sense of accomplishment and fulfillment that I get from something like that is way deeper. It's way more powerful. It's way more profound, and it lasts a lot longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, I feel more successful having just had this discussion, and I'm sure many of our listeners will feel the same. So thank you so much for coming on. As I said, the links to all your work is going to be in the show notes so people can readily and easily access your work. But yeah, thanks for coming on, getting mindful about success with me.
Right on. Thanks so much for having me, Simon. It's been a pleasure to chat with you today.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.